group of leaders from our church met with our stewardship consultant, Pastor Ted Heskins, and began what would become a lengthy process of creating a new mission statement for our church, as well as a statement of values for our church. The group was made up of all of our elders and some church board members, though not necessarily all of the board. But we had some other folks, we had some younger folks and some older folks. There was a good balance of men and women and ethnicity all represented in the process. The first time we met, Pastor Ted walked us through a process that you could describe as self-discovery. We talked about what we were doing as a church and what we want to be doing. We talked about the DNA of our congregation and what we saw as the characteristics, some of the strengths of our church that sort of describe who we are. The list that we generated was quite lengthy. In our second meeting, we began to refine that list and combine the various elements, strengthen the language used to describe those elements. And finally, we developed a list of 7 items that became our statement of core values. With those core values in place, we then began to look for words and catchphrases and alliterations and word rhythms that would sort of capture the uniqueness of our congregation. After a total of 4 meetings, I'm excited about what we came up with, and I hope that it's getting ready to come up on the screen here in just a moment. This is our new mission statement that we're settled on as a church. Knowing Christ, loving people, and proclaiming His return. I think this group did a good job. How about you? Amen. They did a very good job. You'll notice a few differences about this mission statement from our last one. First, it is a lot shorter. It is a lot easier to remember. And our hope is that every member of this congregation will memorize this mission statement. So when someone asks you, what's your church about, you can just roll it out. My church, I'll tell you what it's about. It's about knowing Christ. It's about loving people. It's about proclaiming His return. That's what we do as a congregation. That's sort of a momentum statement that sort of defines us. Would you say it with me? Knowing Christ, loving people, proclaiming His return. You all just got an A on the quiz. Now, there's going to be an exam at the end of the sermon. We'll see if you can also get an A on the exam at the end of the sermon, if you can continue to remember that. Now, there is a criticism that comes up almost every time that a Seventh-day Adventist church develops a mission statement. And I want to kind of head that one off in the past. I want to talk about the criticism before it even comes. It's a criticism that we dealt with 8 years ago when we developed our first mission statement, and I would probably be surprised if it doesn't come up again this time around. And here's the criticism. What does that say about being an Adventist? What does that say about the 3 angels' messages? In fact, you could take this mission statement as it reads right now, and you could import it into almost any other denomination, almost any other church, and it would work just fine. Most of the Christians that I interact with from other denominations, if I told them, hey, this is my church's mission statement, knowing Christ, loving people, proclaiming His return, what do you think of that? Most of them would vigorously nod their head and say, I like that. That's a good mission statement. That mission statement will preach. So what does this say about us, and what does this say about our distinctives? That's the criticism. But the criticism comes from a lack of understanding about what a mission statement is supposed to accomplish. You see, a mission statement is not a doctrinal statement. Now just ruminate on that for a moment, because the implications are very important. We already have a doctrinal statement in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and it's a good one, and we're not trying to change it. By the way, does anyone in this congregation have the authority to change the doctrinal statement of the Seventh-day Adventist Church? No? Well, what about if we put all of our church leaders together and we voted it? Then do we have the authority? Well, what if we have all the church leaders and the pastor, and we combine forces? Do we now have the authority to change the doctrinal statement of the Seventh-day Adventist Church? No, we don't get to do that as a local church. We're part of a worldwide body and a worldwide movement. There's about 16 million of us running around the globe. And we, as a local church, don't get to change the doctrinal statement of the entire denomination. Now, because we know that, we know now that the development of a mission statement is not about that. In other words, it's not a doctrinal statement. That's not what we're trying to accomplish. Rather, a mission statement is a statement about what we're supposed to be doing. It's a declaration that offers guidance to the organization. It says, okay, so you're Seventh-day Adventists, you have this doctrinal statement. That is your identity. You know what you believe. What are you going to do with it? And the what are you going to do with it question, that's where your mission statement comes in. In other words, a mission statement is really designed to put a set of wheels underneath your doctrinal statement and to get it moving. We know who we are. Now what? The now what is the mission statement. Because we know who we are, we're going to know Christ. We're going to love people. And we're going to proclaim His return. That's what being an Adventist does to us. That's what being an Adventist does inside of us. That's what our doctrinal understanding of Scripture causes us to respond. It causes us to respond in this way. So with that as an introduction, let's take this mission statement apart this morning so that we can examine it. First, knowing Christ. And that's as far as we will go today. That's a good start, isn't it? First and foremost in this church, we want to be about knowing Christ. We want to be about the business of pursuing Jesus. And I say that unashamedly, and I say that unapologetically. I say that while maintaining a firm grasp on every doctrine of Adventism and on everything that we believe. If He is not first, preeminent, and the focal point of every doctrine, then Adventism has lost its power, it has lost its point, and it has lost the promise behind its message. Look at this statement, Gospel Workers 3:15. The sacrifice of Christ as an atonement for sin is the great truth around which all other truths cluster. In order to be rightly understood and appreciated, every truth in the Word of God from Genesis to Revelation must be studied in the light that streams from the cross of Calvary. I present before you the great, grand monument of mercy and regeneration and salvation and redemption, the Son of God, uplifted on the cross. This is to be the foundation of every discourse given by our ministers. Amen. Oh, don't those words just stir your heart? It is so easy for me to stand up and read a statement like that for you. Your church is doing that. Your church believes that. Your church, in its mission statement, we had a series of meetings with a cross-section of church leaders. It was a multi-hour, multi-meeting process, and we were firmly agreed, first and foremost, we will be about knowing Christ. Number one. First and foremost, everything else that we teach, talk about, or believe will come forth as lights that stream forth from the cross of Calvary. Now, if that's true, let's talk about some of the implications. Here's an interesting implication. You know what it means we're not about? We're not about the Sabbath. You can't have both of those together, can you? You can't have, either this is our thing or that's our thing. It's one or the other. If this is what we're about, if we're about knowing Christ, if that's first, most important, preeminent, all the rest of that stuff, then apparently we're not about keeping the Sabbath. Now, when I say that, I'm talking about as if that's our thing. That's our one thing. That's our one great contribution. That's the rallying cry that collects us all together. No, not really. Not really. Not if you read our doctrinal statement. Not if you study our history and our heritage and the church fathers and mothers who put this denomination together 150 years ago. Not really. Pastor, how can you say that? Sabbath is important. I mean, we're Seventh-day Adventists. The Sabbath is so important that we put it in our very name. Let me ask you, is the Sabbath important? Yes. Say that unashamedly. It's okay. Yes, the Sabbath is absolutely important. But the Sabbath only has value when it is understood and preached and practiced against the backdrop of a thriving relationship with Christ. And when you disconnect the Sabbath from that, the Sabbath becomes a drudgery. It becomes a mere shell that is but a dull substitute of its former glory. It is neutered from the meaning that God intended it to have. Remember that Jesus said that man was not made for the Sabbath, but the Sabbath was made for us, to serve us and to encourage us. You see, the genius of the Sabbath, the value of the Sabbath, the real blessing of the Sabbath is that the Sabbath creates a space in my life for me to pursue God. It creates a space in the midst of an otherwise hectic and crazy and out of control lifestyle. It creates a space for me to nurture my relationship with God. And if that's true, then is the Sabbath important? Yes, absolutely. Within the context of what it does to nurture my relationship with Christ. Because the Sabbath helps me do the first two words of our mission statement. The Sabbath helps me to know Christ. Now, why did we do this as a church? Why did we create a mission statement, the first two words of which are knowing Christ? Why is it important to know Christ? It is important to know Christ because when you know Christ, you know where you came from. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on the other end of this 2-week series about our mission statement. When you know Christ, you know where you came from because He is your Creator. I want us to think about that in a new way this morning. We've been doing this wonderful quarter where we're talking about creation and science and the melding of the two. I want to share with you something that I learned this week at Week of Prayer. We had a wonderful, wonderful week of prayer at Adventist Christian Academy. And it was taught by Lauren and Cheryl Herbert, who are a couple of teachers that taught for our conference. They just retired. They've been teaching in Seventh-day Adventist Church for 42 years. They both taught science in the upper grades. Learned some wonderful things this week that I didn't know. Anybody know what that is? Any guesses? Oh, I can see I'm frustrated. Any guesses? You know what they teach us in seminary? They say don't use sermon illustrations that people can't see. It frustrates them. So if anybody see it? Are you frustrated? You might know this is part of the point of the sermon. This is a finishing nail. All right? Finishing nail. A finishing nail is a specific kind of nail that has a specific purpose. Guess what you do with it? You finish things. Exactly. Yeah, you guys are sharp. Sharp church. All right? When you're framing your house, you use a nail called a 16-penny nail. The 16-penny nail is a great, big, fat, meaty nail. It's about 3.5 inches long, 2.5 inches long, somewhere there. And it's designed to join one 2x4 to another 2x4. A great big honking nail. It's like a man nail. All right? Then you have the finishing nail. When you're building a house and you do the finish work, which is the molding, the trim, the baseboard, the cord around, you use a tiny little nail. It's called a finishing nail. That's what I'm holding in my hands. Not even the front row can see it. It's so small. That's the point. Do you know that the bomb, the atom bomb, it was named Little Boy, the atom bomb that devastated Hiroshima, destroyed about this much matter? Now, what an atom bomb does is an atom bomb separates atoms through a process called fission. And so it sort of destroys matter, is what it does. And you would think that the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima, if it happens by destroying matter, it must have destroyed a lot of matter, right? It's about this much. About 600 grams. Here's the point. When this matter was destroyed, this amount of matter was destroyed, what happened is that energy was released. The energy that was used to create the matter was then released. How much energy does it take to create something like that? If you put it in reverse, you'll destroy a major city and hundreds of thousands of people. That's just one nail. How many of these do you have in your home? Hundreds. Think of how much energy God used to create the matter just for the nails in your home. Now think about how much energy He must have had to use to create the matter for all of the materials in your home. To say nothing of the lot on which your home sits, or all the homes in your neighborhood, or the county, or the state of North Carolina. You know, at this point, the illustration has already broken down our minds, because in our finiteness, in our smallness, we are not able, with the frailties of human mentality, we're not able to wrap our minds around a concept that big. To think about and to consider how big and how wonderful and how powerful our God is. Think about the creation process in reverse, and you start to get an idea of the amount of power and the amount of energy that resides within our God. Genesis chapter 1, we've been studying this stuff in Sabbath school. I hope that you are coming to Sabbath school. I hope that you are reading your Sabbath school lesson. Understanding what we just understood, I can't even find it, it's so small. How much energy it took to create this much matter, and what happens when that energy is expended in reverse? What happens when you reverse the creation process? Understanding that, understanding how powerful God is. Listen to this, Genesis 1 verse 3. Then God said, "Let there be light," and it was so. That's one little text, one little verse, 3 verses into the biblical record. We're just now getting introduced to God, just beginning to know Christ, as our mission statement calls us to do. One little verse that we just read and just run over it, without really being able to fully understand the implications of that text. Verse 6, then God said, "Let there be firmament in the midst of the waters. Let it divide the waters from the waters." Verse 7, he saw it, and it was so. Verse 9, God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place. Let the dry land appear," and it was so. Verse 14, God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and days and years." We're talking about the sun, moon, and stars. God's creative burst of energy that he expressed in the single week when he created this world. It wasn't just this world. God was creating. He was using this unfathomable amounts of power to create things in the cosmos. The sun, the moon, the stars. Verse 20, God said, "Let the waters abound with an abundance of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth, across the face of the earth, the firmament of the heavens," and it was good. 24, God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to its kind, cattle, creeping things, beasts of the earth, each according to its kind," and it was so. 26, God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." Do you understand the vast, incredible, unfathomable amounts of power that reside within our God? And the power that he expended on our behalf to create this world where we could live and worship him and have a place of fellowship with him. Just imagine for a moment how powerful God is, that he was able to do that. Imagine the energy that issues forth from his voice. But it's even more amazing than that. We go to the latter part of the New Testament, Colossians chapter 2, verse 16. "For by him all things were created that are in heaven, that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones, dominions, principalities, or power. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things consist. And he is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all these things he may have preeminence." Do you get the point? Our God is powerful to a degree that we cannot even begin to wrap our minds around or to understand. Now think of this. Think of the power that is associated with the promises that Jesus makes to you. because he speaks with ultimate authority. One time Jesus was in a boat with his disciples, and a vicious squall threatens to shove their boat to the bottom of the sea. Ellen White tells us that Satan was behind this storm, that he was using the storm as an opportunity to try to kill Jesus and his disciples. But with the authority, with the power of his word, he commands the storm to cease, and he commands the waters to be still. And is it any wonder that they both obeyed? How about this one? Matthew chapter 8. A leper comes to Jesus in the midst of a large crowd. He says, "If you are willing, you can make me whole." And Jesus says, "I am willing. Be thou cleansed." And the leprosy obeyed his voice. Of course it did. The earth, the universe, the material world, the effects of sin and degradation and disease, of course they must obey the voice of he who is the creator and of he who holds the ultimate power in this universe. A woman comes to him with a sickness. This sickness causes her to bleed. She's been bleeding for 8 years. She is gaunt and pale. She is anemic. She has low iron, low energy, and low self-esteem because her disease makes her unclean. She has not been able to worship in the temple for 8 years. And when she but grazes, just gently, just unobtrusively grazes the corner of his robe, the heart of Jesus is so compassionate. It is so anxious to heal. It is so pure in its motive and its desire to restore that the power in him just involuntarily leaps into her body, and she knows in that very instant that she is healed. This story takes place while Jesus is walking across town. He's been called into Jairus' home. Jairus' daughter is sick. She is near death. And while they're making this journey, one of Jairus' servants comes and says, "Don't bother the master. I'm so sorry. She's already died." Jairus falls apart. Right there in front of the little crowd. Maybe he's a little mad. Trying to get Jesus a house before she died. This lady's over here. Bother him. Jesus says, "Don't worry." And he walks into the home, and what everyone else sees is death. Jesus says, "She's asleep." The Bible says they laughed him to scorn. They laughed because of their own ignorance. They did not understand that the Creator, the life giver, had blessed Jairus' home that day. And so he walks up to the little girl, and he says 3 simple words. 3 simple words. "Little girl, arise." She comes back to life. We spend so much time and energy and money and resource and technology and medical school, and we work out and we eat right and we go to the doctor and we take vitamins and we do all these things trying to fight death. For Jesus, he is so powerful, it is 3 little words. "Little girl, arise." I like to envision that Jesus is sitting by her bed. Maybe he's taken that holy hand. He's just caressed her brow. He's thinking, "I've known you your whole life. Whole life. Your life will not be over this day." No, Satan doesn't win today. He doesn't get this one today. No way. We will snatch this one from the jaws of death. And maybe he's holding her hand when he says these words. "Little girl, arise." And her eyes just beep. And she sits up in bed, looks around. "Who are you?" "I'm Jesus." "Let's go find mommy." That's what happens when our God speaks. Because he is the Creator. And he speaks with this incredible authority and this incredible power that he has. He speaks these words on behalf of his children. He loves to exercise his creative power for our benefit. Oh, what about that time that woman came to him with a sickness of a different kind? Hers was not a sickness of the body, but a sickness of the soul. She had been involved in affair after affair after affair in a day when that act brought with it the death sentence. Her sickness was a sickness of the heart. It manifested as an addiction that was designed to fill an aching void in her life. But every time she shoved another relationship into that void, hoping to fill it, the void only became bigger. Here come the church leaders now, dragging this humiliated and outcast one. They cast her at Jesus' feet. She is bruised. She has bloody knees, disheveled hair, tear-stained face, streaked with the dust of the dirty street in which she now lay. Her soiled body is clad in nothing more than the sheet that she tore from the bed of her forbidding mother. The haughty Pharisees towering above her, scowl in contempt, only too anxious to carry out this death sentence that the law requires. What say you, Jesus? She tenses and bows her head even lower as she waits for the condemnation. Jesus' response: neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. Jesus once said in John 15:3, you are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. And so he speaks this word on her behalf. Neither do I condemn you. In that moment, she is clean. And she is forgiven. Because his word has the power to make us clean. And the text does not tell us, but I would be willing to bet that this woman, caught in the very act, went and did exactly what Jesus told her to do. That she went and she sinned no more. No wonder the priests could not trap him, the lawyers could not trip him, and Satan could not tempt him in a way that would tangle him up in sin. Because he is the creator. He is all-powerful. He is the Redeemer, and he is the Savior of the world. And he invites you to know him. Knowing him simply begins by saying, Jesus, I accept you. It's that simple. And I think that we make it too difficult sometimes. I think that sometimes we throw too many theological words at it, we over-intellectualize it, we overcomplicate it, and we hold it out of the reach of average people. But it's not hard. It's not supposed to be. Jesus wants to be known by you. That is why he came. That's why he tells these stories. Stories like the lost sheep and the lost coin and the lost son. We also know it as the prodigal son. But the focus of the story is not really the son. The focus of the story is the compassion of the Father. And the point of the story is that this is what God is like. This is how God feels about sinners. This is how God feels about people. This is the type of thing that God is willing to do in order to be in a relationship with you. I am overwhelmed that a God like that would want to know me. I am further overwhelmed that he would allow himself to be known by me. And you are attending a church that recognizes this fact when it states that our first order of business is to know this Christ who loves us. And that we begin to do this by simply accepting him. So, what do you say we do that? Would that be okay? Here's an idea I have. What if on the first day that we rolled this out to the church, our new mission statement? What if on the first day that we did this, we spent the whole morning on the first 2 words, and then we responded to those words? What if today as a body, we said, we covenanted together, we agreed together, you know what, if that's our mission statement, if that's where God has led us, if that's what we're going to be about, then that's what we're going to do by God's grace. What if we did that? What if today we said, you know what, I'm willing to follow the lead of the church leaders, of those who have come together and who have prayed and who have wrestled and who have sweated through this process, who have followed the Lord's leading for this congregation, and said, I'm willing to embrace that. Sign me up. I want to give you an opportunity to do that this morning. I want to ask you to stand to your feet with me. I'm going to ask Olga to come up and just play a little note on the ground. And I want to ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes. As we move into the very most important moment of this worship service. One day, a long time ago, the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters. And the waters were without form, they were void. But God spoke, and there was life. Maybe today, someone here has a heart that feels like those old, cold, dark, lonely waters. And maybe today you need to hear a word from God. Maybe today you need to hear an invitation from Him. Maybe today in response to this message, in response to this gospel word, you are in this moment for the first time in a long time seeing God as a God who invites you to know Him, a God who wants you to know Him, a God who came so that you could know Him. And so I want to ask right now, the first part of this invitation, I want to ask if there is anybody in this room who has not yet accepted Christ, who has not yet followed Him in baptism, who has not yet gone through that spiritual process of just completely surrendering your heart and your soul to Him. I want to ask you to just quietly step out of your pew, to meet me down here in the front. I want to encourage you not to look to the left or the right, or to worry about who may be watching. This is prayer time. This is time between you and God. This is sacred stuff, and this is spiritual stuff, and this is heart stuff that God calls you to right now. We're not in a hurry. We don't want to rush this moment. If you're that one that God is talking to this morning, you've never surrendered it before, and you feel the Spirit moving on you right now, and you know that this is your moment, and this is your time, then I invite you to come to the front. Meet me here. Be willing to make that courageous step in His name today. Everyone else in this church right now is praying for you. And they're thinking of you. Everyone who is already responding to this call sometime earlier in their life, they've already stepped into the waters of baptism and they have experienced the regeneration and the joy, the reformation that comes from that moment. Those people are praying for you right now. And they're praying that you will respond to God's invitation this morning. first and the best day of the rest of your life. Won't you come? And then I want to talk to a second group of people here today. I want to talk to anyone here today that's already been in the waters of baptism. You've already surrendered your heart to Christ. You have a spiritual history, but you've wandered away. You spent some time in the far country. There was just a time in your life when you just got tangled up in the temptations and the invitations of this world. You lost your focus and you lost your commitment on Jesus. And so today is rededication day for you. Today is the day where you go back and experience your first love and you find it again. And you say, God, I'm sorry. I blew that one, but I know how much you love me. And I'm going to respond to your love today. For those of you who have wandered away, maybe it's been a long time since you've been in this sanctuary or any other sanctuary. You wandered away. Well, then today is your day to wander right on back to Jesus. If you have backslidden, today you get to slide on back. I invite you just to slip out of your pew and to join me down here in the front. Folks, we're not in a hurry. And if you're wrestling with God right now in a moment of decision, valley of decision, know that we're praying for you. We are cheering you on, and we are asking that God would have his way in you today. Would you respond to his call just now? This thing that's taking place in your heart right now, that is the Spirit of God talking to you. It is the Spirit of God calling you. Would you respond to his call in your life right now? Thirdly, this morning, we talked to a third group of people this morning. You're the ones who've already followed him in baptism. You're not the one who wandered away into the far country. You've been here. You've been nurturing a thriving relationship with Christ. And you continue to want to do that today. But maybe this morning you're actually feeling a little frustrated. There's a call going on that hasn't yet targeted you, and you just want to have the opportunity to say, I choose Jesus. I'll rededicate my life. I love him. I've loved him for a long time, but I just want to make a public declaration this morning that I will continue to love him. If that's you this morning, I want to invite you to slip out of your pew and just come join me here in the front. Now we'll get all clogged up with a lot of people. It's okay. It's okay. There's room for you. There is something important that takes place in your heart and your life when you physically respond and when you publicly respond. And when you say, yep, I've chosen Jesus, but I just want everyone to know that I still do. And this is an opportunity for you to do that. Come join us here. God sees your decision this morning. Whether it is a decision to accept him for the first time, whether it is a decision to come back to him because you have wandered away, or whether it is a decision where you're saying, I just want to do it all over again and rededicate my life again. Not that I wandered away, but the truth is, I want to be closer. And I want to make a commitment this morning that just gives testimony, that just bears witness of that. Of the fact that I want to be close to Jesus. This year, I want to do that. I want 2013 to be a year where God and I, our relationship just goes to a whole new place. For me, this will be a year to know Christ, to love people, and to proclaim His name. God sees your commitment. His heart is thrilled to see that commitment and to enjoy this moment of fellowship and interaction with you. Thank you for your response to Him. Thank you for your courage and for your faithfulness this morning. Now, for this third group that has come up, if you would like to speak with me or speak with an elder about this commitment and about the commitment that you're making this morning, we would love to have that discussion. I'll remind you that there will be a prayer service that meets behind the platform immediately after worship. And I and the elders, after church, we're just going to hang around up here at the front and just be available to hear your word of witness or your word of testimony, and have prayer with you. If there's a specific word you would like to share, have prayer with you. We would like to do that with you this morning. Let's bow our heads as we pray and close the service. God, I want to thank you that you are our Creator. And as such, you wield this incredible, incredible power for the benefit of your children. And Lord, I thank you that here this morning in this place, in our very presence, we have witnessed your use of creative power. Because in this moment, you are doing the work of regenerating hearts and lives. I thank you for each person, each mother and father and husband and wife and child who has made a commitment to you this morning. And Lord, we know that you are a God who longs to be known by us. And our commitment to you this morning is that we want to know you. We want to know you, as 1 Corinthians says, Lord, 1 Corinthians 13, we want to know you fully, even as we are fully known. May this be the year where that begins to happen in our lives. For we pray this prayer in the name of our Jesus.